Folks.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Syos Live. I'm really happy tonight to be with Zem Audu. Hi Zem, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How you doing, Pauline? Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm doing good too. So let's talk. And people, if you have some question, please you can just send the question on Instagram or on Facebook and YouTube, and Zem will answer them for you. Yeah, but I just wanted to start by the beginning. So you grew up in London, and I was wondering if it was the place where you learned about jazz and reggae.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, I spent from the age of like 4 years old until I was about 24. I was in and around London. So I was in London for a little bit and then I moved to Kent. And Kent is just like southeast of London.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent a lot of time in this small little town called Rochester, that area, Rochester, Chatham. That's where I went to school. There's a nice grammar school there called Sir Joseph Williamson's Mathematical School. And it's like, you know, one of those suit and tie, your school uniform, schools, houses, prefects, that, you know, that whole vibe, that full English school experience. And that's where I started studying music, officially studying music. There's a great school program of what they call peripatetic teachers that come to schools and they'll give kids like a 20-minute class during school hours. So you can take 20 minutes out of whatever class you've got. I always like to take time out of history because I didn't like history when I was in school. Now I love it, obviously, because it's so important. But at the time, I didn't like studying history. So whenever my class was during history, it was great. I could take 20 minutes out, go play saxophone with this amazing teacher. His name was Randolph Colville. He became a mentor for me. Very, very sweet person, very knowledgeable about music, and very peculiar too. Like he could go about 20 minutes without needing a cigarette. And then he would have to run to his car, have a few cigarettes, and come back and teach the next class. He was full of joy, full of love. You know, he was a great person. He passed maybe like a few years after I met him. But we became good friends, and he was always an inspiration to me as a musician. So that's where I first started with the saxophone. He was my first saxophone teacher, let's say. Yeah, and about jazz and reggae, you could say that he kind of guided me towards that jazz music. When I first started saxophone, it was really just the instrument that caught me. It was the instrument that caught my attention. I played guitar, some classical guitar, some piano before, but it was the instrument that caught me. And I had to beg my parents for a long time, at least a year. I had to beg my parents for a saxophone, finally got one, and then started working with Randolph Colville at school. And he slowly just started trying to figure out what kind of music I was into. And then he would guide me towards certain records, and he would show me certain techniques. You know, I was 13 at the time, so he just kind of went at the pace that I could handle. And then as I started getting more into it and started discovering Coltrane and Sonny Rollins and Charlie Parker, and that whole world just started to open up. Then I started discovering all the great musicians who were in and around the UK. One of them was the great Courtney Pine. And at this stage, maybe I was 15, and I went to see Courtney at a show, and I asked him, like, hey, you're the best saxophonist I've ever seen play. Can you give me lessons? And he was just like, well, I don't really do lessons. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Figured I'd ask. But then he just said, but why don't you come to my next show? Come early, bring your horn, bring your parents. I'll put you all on the guest list. And he did this. And so I went down to see him, and after his sound check, he just sat down with me. My folks were in the room. He sat down with us, and he was just like, "So show me your horn, show me what you got." And he just gave me this like hour and a half lesson. And then we just did this maybe every couple months for years. He's just like really sweet, open guy, showed me so much about the saxophone, so much about music. And, you know, Courtney has this beautiful hybrid of reggae, DJ music, jazz. I mean, he played with some of the greats too when he was in the States. So his jazz vocabulary was so strong. But he also had this really interesting reggae Caribbean vocabulary and musical understanding that he added to his music. So that was a big inspiration for me. I started to see, oh, there's other things you can do with this. There's other styles of music you can add, and it's other ways you can play the saxophone and really open it up as an instrument beyond any one particular genre. And then, you know, working in the scene in London, there's such a big West Indian, Caribbean scene in London. So playing reggae music was like second nature almost. So some of the gigs I would do, I find myself working with Dawn Penn one week. I find myself working with Earl Dunkley one week, Minor Hague another time, Sonny Bradshaw. So it was, it was just like a natural cross section of playing jazz tours and jazz shows and going to Trinity College of Music, studying jazz, but then also just in my life, in my musical life, playing a lot of reggae, being around the West Indian Caribbean community and just exploring that in London. That's how those two things kind of bridged for me.
Okay, so technical issue. I think you are, so the connection is really good here on YouTube, but you are cutting on Instagram. So I don't know, can you maybe put you on the Wi-Fi?
Plug in on the Wi-Fi. Let's see here. Is this upside down or is this the right way up? That's upside down. No, it's just right. Here we go. Okay, here we go. How about now? Is it still cutting or is it? Oh, yeah. It feels like it's a little bit delayed on. Okay,
Yeah,
you say
like,
good connection. Okay, cool.
It's delayed.
Kaleta, is that you? Good to see you, my friend. How you doing? Nice.
Yeah, I think we still have some issues on Instagram, but technical issue. Maybe it's okay. We will try like that, and
okay.
Otherwise, if it's cutting on Instagram, you can come on Facebook or YouTube. We are here, and it's working. Okay. So.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah. So you said that the saxophone caught you, but can you just tell me why? Like, what was so special about that instrument in comparison with the guitar or other thing? Like,
I wish I knew.
Yeah.
I really wish I knew. I can't tell you. I wish I knew what it was that caught me about the saxophone, but it just caught me. It was one of those things. One of my uncles played the saxophone, actually. And I thought maybe he was an inspiration because I remember we visited him in Texas and he had a saxophone and he showed it to me. And he always says, no, it definitely couldn't have been him because he was a terrible saxophone player. it's like, couldn't have been me. I was not an inspiration. You know, I couldn't play saxophone. But I think that exposure to the saxophone and just seeing it and it being just like a cool instrument and just seeing the shape of it, seeing how, I don't know, I was interested. It caught me. It just caught me. It was one of those things. And I just feel like, there's not many things that like 12, 13-year-old me would be so interested in that I would, you know, beg for it to my parents for a year. You know what I'm saying? So it was, that kind of situation where, once it had caught me, it didn't let go, and I didn't let go. And I just kept on asking for one. And at the time, a saxophone was very expensive. So what we did first was my parents rented me a saxophone. Well, actually, this is how it happened. My dad, who's a great artist, his name's Syos Audu. You should definitely check out his work, Syos Audu. He was going to Korea for an exhibit, and I'd been begging my parents for a long time to get me a saxophone. So when he went to Korea for like a month, I think he went to Korea, I knew that was my opportunity to really work on my mom and just really see if I could get this saxophone. I was like, Mom, please get me the saxophone. So I just went to work, and then she caved, and she was like, all right, I'm going to rent this saxophone. I want you to learn a little bit so that by the time your dad gets back, he's going to let you keep this saxophone and he's going to let you stay in lessons. So got the saxophone, went to school, asked to be taught by Randolph Colville. He showed me like how to put the mouthpiece on correctly. I had it upside down when I first got it out of the box, and he just taught me a few notes, and it went really quick for me. I could play a few notes, I could play a little song, I could play a scale, I could do all of that stuff really quickly within the first lesson or two. There was like no dissonance there between me getting into the instrument. So by the time my dad got back, he saw I was really into it. He saw I could already play a few little songs and some scales and stuff. So my mom's plan worked, essentially. And I was able to stay in lessons, and I was able to keep renting this horn until my parents were able to buy me my own saxophone. And that was just like an amazing experience, having my own saxophone. It was an alto saxophone at first. It was a Trevor James alto saxophone student model, but I loved that horn. Played great. And then I was experimenting with like how the best way to put the reed on. I remember that at times, like how close to the tip I wanted the reed and how tight to screw in the ligature and all those things just to feel more comfortable. And it was just a journey. From then on, it was a real journey, because I remember just like trying to learn how to blow through the instrument without like biting my lip too much. And I remember trying to figure out how to do these fingerings and wondering how people could play faster, or wondering how these great musicians could play higher and be in tune. And I was trying to use my ears to like hit the notes in tune and use a little tuner. It's just, I was having fun just trying to put this puzzle together. And then with the help of my saxophone teacher, it was like, yeah, he would show me these techniques. I'd go home and practice and try and figure out what scales meant, try and figure out what modes were and diminished scales. And I was just trying to use logic to help put this puzzle together. And then when I met Courtney, it all just took off. It went into a whole other dimension, because he showed me things that I could never have even thought about on my own. He showed me all these different approaches to like playing the saxophone that you would hear on a record, but you'd have no idea how to create that sound. You had no idea how to put these notes together, how to play these ideas and concepts, until I was shown that by Courtney. So he really opened up that conceptual avenue of the saxophone and music for me. So it was it was an adventure. Still is an adventure for sure with the sax.
That's a nice story. So so then you moved to the US. So when was it, and why specifically New York?
Well, I moved to New York in 2010. Now, my family moved to New York maybe 5 years before, or 4 years before that. And I was still in college at the time. I think it was my first year of college. Both me and my sister were out the house, and my parents just like, we're thinking about moving to New York. How do you feel about that? I was like, that's great. Yeah, do it. Wonderful. My dad had some work opportunities there for his art, so it was a good move for him. They moved upstate. And so while I was in college, I would just visit for a month here, my summer break, or a couple of weeks there in winter, and just spend holidays in New York, but mainly upstate. And I'd come down to the city every once in a while, check out some cool shows, and go upstate, hang with my parents a bit, then go back to school in the UK. And I was starting to tour a little bit in the UK, and I was starting to play some shows, London Jazz Festival, and all these kinds of things. So initially, I didn't have any desire to move to New York. But, you know, my family was there, so there was that pull. Like, maybe if I could work something out and be in New York, then that would be cool, because then it's the best of both worlds. You get this beautiful city with access to so much great music and musicianship. And then I can also be closer to my family. They live a few hours outside of the city, but I could be closer to my family. So there was that consideration. But I was thinking at the time, maybe I'll just stay in New York. But a friend who I'd met in New York, he said, okay, I appreciate you want to kind of go back to London, but why don't you just move in to this apartment that I have? There's a room here. Move in here for a month before you go. Just check it out, hang out, come to the scene, check things out, go to the jam sessions, just see how you feel here. And then at least you've given it a good shot, and you know if you go back to London, then you made the right decision. So it was coming to the end of that month in New York, and I was just like, man, I just met the Skatalites. They offered me this job, touring around the world. That just like met so many people in New York. And I felt like I was growing as a musician at that time more in New York. So I just called up my folks and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to stay. And the Skatalites, they helped me apply for an artist visa, and then we set all that stuff up. So I was able to stay, and it just worked so seamlessly. It was like, it was just meant to be a part of my journey, that process of moving from London to New York. And I love London. I was thinking about staying, seriously considering staying in London. But this just felt like such a part of my own personal journey that I couldn't ignore that. So I moved to New York in 2010. And since then, it's just been lessons after lessons after lessons, experiences. And to be honest, there's been a lot of time outside of New York, just traveling around the world with the Skatalites and Steel Pulse and Lauryn Hill and the Bleachers and all these other amazing bands that I've been fortunate enough to work with. So it's been a rich experience. I am very grateful that I had the opportunity to move to New York, to the US. It is an opportunity that not everyone gets. And I have to give thanks to the Skatalites crew for helping me do that, because they're the ones who applied for my artist visa before I could get my green card. So it was, as I say, it was just a seamless journey for me. It was just a part of my story.
Do you sometimes think of moving back to London?
No, not at this stage, no.
Okay.
So
how do you compare the New York and London stage for reggae, for example, or jazz? What's the main difference for you?
For reggae, London is a cool place because the Caribbean community is so deep there. It's deep in America too, but it's so strong there for many reasons, you know, with that whole Windrush British colonialism era. There's, you know, they eventually gave access for people of West Indian and Caribbean, West African descent to move to England and become English citizens. There was a pathway there for that, as there should have been. So the community of West Indians, Caribbeans, West Africans was so strong in London, in South London in particular, but all over London, all over the UK, Birmingham as well. There were like hotspots of that community. So it made it a fertile ground for that culture to take hold. That's why there were so many killing reggae bands in England. So many, Steel Pulse, Aswad, all these kind of bands that just really were doing the thing. And so many other Jamaican artists that made their name in England. Even Bob Marley, you could say, made his name really in England. So it's or his international name in England. He was a star from being back in Jamaica for sure. But that was something about England that really made it a thriving music scene, music community. So, but then New York or America in general, California has a big reggae scene, but America in general took onto that music a lot as well. So it's like once reggae became an international genre, that was it. It just took off, Everyone wanted that feeling, that energy, that vibe, that sound. So it's a special music,
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not sure if the Instagram is still on. I think it.
It's not. I cut it down. It's
okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll stay here.
All right.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about jazz and reggae, but I guess your sound is not just limited to that. So you blend like other genres too. So can you tell us more about your influences? What's your favorite artists, and how do you get those influences and do your sound from that?
Yeah, it's for me, there's a natural process. It's a pretty natural process. It goes from the music that connects deeply with me and the music that I listen to on a daily basis and the musical situations that I find myself in and try and get myself into. So the music I've always loved, guys like Stevie, FJ. When I was growing up, I was heavy into Erykah Badu and Mos Def and Q-Tip and Jill Scott, that whole neo-soul movement, D'Angelo, The Roots. I was also big into different forms of dance music, like modern dance music, Afrobeat dance music, just like anything with a groove, really. So anything I could hear that kind of made me dance, made me move, made me groove. I did some dance myself. There was a point where I was doing like b-boy dancing and break dancing when I was in high school. So it was like a big thing for me to be able to dance to music. So any music that I played, I was more into it if it had some movement involved, if it could groove, if it could move. The jazz music that I loved was kind of really swinging, energetic jazz music. The Art Blakey's and the Sonny Rollinses and the Ben Websters, and that music that just had a real swing to it, something that would move either your body or your emotions. There was movement there. And then I was also a sucker for really sensitive, sentimental music, like Coltrane Ballads album is one of my favorite sounds of Coltrane, one of my favorite sounds of Coltrane. And the tone of Ben Webster and the tone of Dexter Gordon, that emotional essence and sound, and great songwriting, whether it be like Bob Dylan or the Beatles or the Stones or, anything like that. And, fun pop music as well. I just kind of loved it all. So I just, I try not to put too much pressure on myself with what I should and shouldn't like or listen to. And that can be tough sometimes with, going through like school systems and you know, you have assignments, you have all these things, you have to learn certain pieces of music. But I try personally not to be too strict with what I should or shouldn't like, should or shouldn't listen to. I just let myself like what I like, listen to what I listen to, hear what I hear. And then I just try and put it together in the music that I play, in the situations that I find myself in. So I was lucky to find myself in situations where the music was grooving. Skatalites is a grooving band. You know, you're playing with Lloyd Nib. He was like a drum master. He really knew how to make the drums dance. He made the people dance. Val Douglas, he's recorded with Bob Marley. He's recorded with all these reggae legends. He knows how to make that instrument sing, how to make that beat dance. So playing with those guys was a pleasure. And when Lloyd passed and Sparrow took over, he brought another like real solid 4 on the floor energy to it. And he also had that ability to make people dance with his drumming. So it was just a pleasure to be able to play in that situation where I really dug the music that I was playing, you know, and I really appreciated all of the musicians that I was playing with, and they brought something else out of my playing. And the rest is just, you know, the day in, the day out. It changes how you play. When you're on tour 6 months out of the year, 7 months out of the year, and you're playing like night after night, it changes how you play. The response from the audience, it just changes how you play. It's like something comes out of your playing that you may not necessarily even have thought would come out of your playing. It just develops into this thing over time. And I just go with the flow and, you know, keep up the disciplines of practicing, but allow my playing to just become what it's going to become. You know, it's a pretty organic process. It's not too academic, let's say, for me.
Okay, so so talking about your music, so your album Spirits features fusion guitar legend Mike Stern, and he worked with Billy Cobham and Miles Davis. So how did you two meet and decide to collaborate on that project?
That was a chance encounter, actually. It was one of Mike's manager and I knew each other. And I was talking with her about this project, and I didn't know she was Mike's manager at the time. And she was like, okay, so who's going to be on the project? And I was telling her who was on it. And then I was like, but it would be really cool if I could have Mike Stern on this album. That fusion sound, I love the way he plays. It was just kind of a dream that I didn't know how would happen. I was just throwing it out there, just as you would talk to someone you know, you just kind of randomly say something. And she was like, oh, that's interesting. You know, I just started being Mike's manager. Maybe I could make that happen. And I was like, oh, cool. And then it just, one thing led to another. And that's how I met Mike. And she asked him if he wanted to do it. And he said, yeah, he'd heard of my playing before. And I was like, okay, sweet. I didn't know that I was on his radar, but he accepted. And then since then, it was amazing to see how he works on a project with someone who, you know, he's a huge name. Me, I wasn't a huge name. So I was just like, how's this going to happen? How's this going to work? Mm-hmm. He was really sweet, really humble. And the thing I was most impressed by is that he really took his time to learn the music. He would leave voicemails on my phone like, hey man, I'm checking out these tunes. Does it go like this? Or does it go like this? And he'd like try a different articulation. And I just like listening to this voicemail, just couldn't believe it. Like Mike Stern is really, really digging into my music. The songs that I wrote, he's really trying to understand it, learn it, bring his best to it. So I really loved that. I really appreciated that. I learned so much from that. And we had a great time just over the months preparing for the album and then in the studio with the guys. And he told us so many stories. We were all just like listening to, you know, the words from this experienced musician. And yeah, it just made it a very fun session. It made it really cool. We could all just explore the tunes, and the songs aren't too complex. There are things that have more complexity to them, but it's more about the groove and the vibe. Even if the grooves are a little odd in terms of their time signature, it's really about exploring them, opening them up, and really bringing that dance groove element to them. So we had fun in that session. It was a beautiful experience for us all.
Yeah, and then in 2020 you also worked with the band Steel Pulse, so we talked about it a little bit earlier, but then you earned a Grammy nomination. So how did it feel?
Yeah, it felt great. It felt really good. Yeah,
I guess.
It's one of those things that you kind of hear about when you're growing up in music. Oh, people win Grammys, you see pop stars and just like celebrities winning Grammys, but it's not even something that I ever it's not a position that I ever put myself in my mind. It was like not something I was thinking about. I was just out there, doing the album and doing the work. There was no talk of us being nominated for a Grammy or anything like this. Some of those tracks I recorded in my home studio, and there's this one track that it's a little interlude that this is called Zem, and the story behind that is that we were on the road, and David had been working on these songs for years and years. He'd been working on this new album, and he'd been trying some of these songs on the road, and one of them was called Stop You Coming and Come, and it was about the journey to Ethiopia. He went to Ethiopia, and he wrote this song as a kind of message for himself to go back to Ethiopia, and for anyone else who felt that inclination to just go and do it, go back, visit this place that has so much history and spiritual knowledge, and go back there to Ethiopia. And he said, stop your coming and come, like stop hesitating, just go on with this journey, like proceed. And so he told me the story of it, and I always thought it was an impactful tune, but then he was like, so I need an intro. Do you want to write an intro for this tune? And we were on the road. So I just wrote something real quick. I found this horn line and I showed the guys and we played it. And I felt like it was such an honor to be asked by David Hines to, write an intro for a song that he'd been working on for so long. And then later he was like, maybe you can write a little interlude or something that can go before the song. So I put it together, played the drum parts, the percussion, played the flute, the saxophone, and I just layered this Ethiopian musical sound on top of these drum rhythms just to bring that message home, like that Ethiopian sound, these traditional Ethiopian scales, this specific Nyabingi groove, just to connect that Ethiopian tradition, that Jamaican tradition, and just kind of bring the song home as well as that message. And sent it to David. He liked it. He had his engineer just edit one or two things, put it together, mixed, mastered. And then he didn't tell me what it was going to be called. It was only when I saw the album that I saw that he called it Zem. And I was like, okay, cool. That's really interesting. So, it was just one of those things where I had such a good time playing the music. I was so honored to be in that position and have this relationship with David musically, and just have him be able to be so open, share the stories of the music, because that's when it really transforms and takes a whole new meaning with the stories. So that helped me to create and just add this little contribution to that album, and then some of the horn lines that either I arranged or David and me arranged together, and we performed on there. It was just a beautiful process that started long before I joined Steel Pulse, long before. They were working on this years before. So to be able to come in towards the end of that process and add a few little things. And then for the album to go on to be successful and to be acclaimed, and we were nominated for a Grammy. It was just like a nice experience, you know, nothing that I would have imagined would happen, but it was just a nice experience that I really appreciated. Yeah.
Can you play a part of it?
I don't have any horns set up right now, but it's on Apple Music. How about that? It's on Apple Music.
Okay. Sure. So do you have any plans for a tour with Steel Pulse soon?
Yeah, Steel Pulse is actually going on tour. If you should check out their tour dates, they start at the end of July, and I unfortunately can't make this tour. I was booked on a previous tour with a really cool band that I'm also working with called the Bleachers. So we're going to be going out in at the beginning of September all the way through until November. We're going to be playing all the really cool US festivals and Governor's Ball. If you're in New York, come check that one out. But definitely check out Steel Pulse website, because they're going to be going on tour all across the States. And this first part of the tour, I won't be able to be there, but I'll be joining them again in mid-November, and then we have some Hawaii stuff coming up later. So
nice.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, you are joining for the best part.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you have played with a lot of people. So you also worked with the Julian Marley. So it's the son of Bob Marley. So how was it? Like, how did you meet also, and how was it to work with him?
That was with the Skatalites, and you know, Bob Marley and the Skatalites have a history. Bob Marley's first record was with the Skatalites. So if you listen to Bob Marley singing "Simmer Down," this is even before reggae music. He's kind of singing ska music, you know. So Bob Marley and the Wailers, you could say they started out as a ska group, because that was the music of the time. And so when he's singing "Simmer Down," that's with the Skatalites. So there's that history there of the Skatalites and the Marleys. And it was one of the things with the managers, and we were both scheduled for a festival in Colombia, and Julian wanted to do it with the Skatalites. We wanted to do it with Julian. So our teams put us together, and it was an amazing experience that it happened. So we flew into Colombia. We rehearsed for this festival, got to hang out with Julian. We played our set, and we also played like 5-6 songs of Julian's set. So we could just like really dig into Julian's music and just get time to hang and reason and talk. And we were staying on this resort, so we just would chill and we'd hang out at dinner and just vibe and get to know each other a lot better. I believe he already knew some of the elders in the band, so you know, they already had a relationship, but it was my first time really meeting him. And he's such a humble guy, such a like thoughtful musician, thoughtful person. So it was really a blessing just to spend that little time with him and just play this music. We had a great show. We tore the place down. It was amazing. They love him out in Colombia, and you know, they are big fans of the Skatalites too. So for them, it was just like an amazing marriage. And then there was talks of us doing some other things, but you know, COVID kind of came through, and then it was like, you know, yeah, Julian is a special musician, most definitely.
Did he ever disclose some anecdotes about his father that?
Not really, you know, not really. It was for some reason or another, we never really talked about that, you know. I feel like when it comes to family, it's a little bit different, you know, because obviously as a personality himself, and as the son of a major personality as well, like a musician, a big celebrity icon, you know, as a member of the public, you know, we kind of have different ideas or thoughts or questions maybe. But I personally feel like when it comes to family, I only want to know what someone wants to share.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? So if that comes up in conversation, I'm all ears and I love hearing stories. But if it doesn't, I'm very respectful of family and just like people's privacy and them wanting to keep parts of their just experience just for themselves, just for family, and just enjoy that for themselves and leave that where it may be. So I generally just, you know, yeah, as I said, I'll only really talk about something that someone's willing to discuss or share. So if they bring something up, then cool, let's talk, you know.
Yeah, sure. Do you have a practice routine to stay sharp on the saxophone?
Sharp, yeah. Could say that. It depends on what's going on in my life. I put it like that. When I'm on tour, the practice is different. It's there's a lot more listening involved in my practice, and there's a lot more quiet practice involved because you're around a lot of people, and you know, it's you can only really do so much. And when I'm at home, then I can dig into a specific routine depending on what's, you know, like as we were talking about before this call, I just had another kid. I just had my second kid. So these kinds of things kind of suspend your routine a little bit. But in general, my routine is very simple. I start with rudiments, open up my breathing, open up the instrument, and just have fun with it. Explore like the sound, just reconnect to the sound, some long tones, some scales, just something fun. And then I dig into something a bit more technical. I'll try and learn some ideas, some patterns, and then it's more about listening and learning whatever material it is I am learning. So it's really those three stages, just of opening up the instrument, just feeling comfortable with it, exploring the sound, then digging into some technique, trying to push myself technically. And then it's about listening, learning the material for the job that I'm doing or for the project I'm working on. It's pretty simple, my routine, you know.
Okay. And so yeah, you have been playing on your Syos Mousepiece for like a long time now. Like yeah, it was 3 years ago, right? Like we met.
Something like that, yeah.
And yeah, how did it change your play, or what did the mouthpiece bring to your sound?
What I like about that mouthpiece is that it's open. And if anyone who's checked out the specs on that mouthpiece, they'll know that it's a really open, large mouthpiece. So I like to put a lot of air through the instrument, and I like a mouthpiece that isn't gonna choke or close up. So this one is a particularly large one. Before that, I was playing on a 9, and I really like the more open sound. It lets me push harder if I want to, but it also lets me be more sensitive and still have the volume, the size, the projection, but most importantly, the clarity that I'm looking for in my tone. So I've played a Yanagisawa piece before, a 9. I've played a V16 piece as well, like a 9 star. So this one was just another step in that journey of looking for something that's really focused, really clear, but wide open and has enough to take the air that I'm going to push into it. So that's really what I was looking for. When you came and saw me at New Morning in Paris and you asked me what it was, I think I said something pretty similar to that. I was looking for a mouthpiece that was open, crystal clear, that I could just play and it wouldn't choke up on me and it wouldn't It didn't add too much to my sound or take too much away. I just wanted it to be able to, I wanted to put my sound through this mouthpiece, you know. So it was that worked great for me, and it still does. I still play it on many of my things. And certain other mouthpieces I have will create a different sound. And when I'm looking for that, I'll use them. But as just a general overall mouthpiece, I still play this quite regularly, this Syos Mousepiece.
What would be your recommendation to any aspiring saxophone player?
Wow. Let me see. So let me put it this, because I don't know what situation anyone else is in right now. I don't know what situation any aspiring saxophonist is in. So I could only really talk to myself when I was aspiring to be a saxophonist. And if I was talking to myself now, I would say, have fun with the music and don't stop playing. That would be it. Just make sure you're having fun, keep growing and learning, listening to the greats, and don't stop. I feel like that's all I could really say. You know, the rest, I feel like everything else worked out in the moment. Everything else, there were always times when I thought, oh man, maybe this is just as good as I am. Maybe I'm not going to get to that next level. And then you keep practicing, and you find yourself on gigs, and you have a good time, or sometimes you beat yourself up a little bit. But then a year later, you listen to your playing, you're like, wow, I'm at that next level. Or it's like, maybe, I would really love to tour. When I was in school, I was like, oh man, I'd love to tour. I'd love to get out of school and start touring. And I spoke with Kirk Lightsey, this great pianist. He lives in France, actually. He used to play with Dexter Gordon. And I remember I was talking with him in the cafeteria, and he'd just given us a master class. And for some reason, he wanted to sit down and talk with me. So I was like, wow, talking with Kirk Lightsey. And he was like, so what are you into? What would you like to do? So I was like, I'd love to tour. I just love to tour and play music. And he was just like, yeah, don't worry, you will. It's just like, don't worry about that. You will. And what that did for me was just like, oh yeah, just relax. Just enjoy everything. Like, don't have any anxiety about what's going to happen or not going to happen. Just relax, play your music. Keep letting your enthusiasm guide you to the next level. And so I learned that from hearing Kirk Lightsey just say, don't worry, you will. And yeah, that's the kind of advice that I would like to give to any other aspiring musician. Like, don't worry about it. Just have fun with the music. Have fun with your instrument. Let your enthusiasm take you to the next step. Look for the masters that are around you as well. That's another thing I would add. Look for the masters that are around you, because there are people who can offer you some insights. Whether it's the records that you listen to, like, treat that as a masterclass. Like, oh, what is Charlie Parker saying to me? Or whether it's the people that come through town and you can maybe talk to them, like, ask them something. Or maybe it's a teacher that you have, just really ask them and look for the masters that are around you. And then, you know, just don't stop. Don't stop playing.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a few questions left. So I was also wondering, how did you handle the whole COVID situation, but from a creative point of view, how was it for you?
From a creative point of view, it was interesting. Because COVID, it hit and it suspended so much. So it was almost like you were in suspended animation. That, you know, it was almost like when so many things are removed from your day-to-day life that were a big part of your day-to-day life, you're left with all this time.
Mm-hmm.
And with that time, I just had to find what I was going to do with that time. And a big part of what I did with that time was spend time with my family. And then another part was just reconnect with music in a way that I didn't realize I needed, but I really needed. Because one of the things that I found about being a musician is that even though it's the thing that I've always loved as a part of my life, so it's a thing that I've always loved to do, listen to, be around, be a part of. As a musician, going from tour to events, to club dates, to record dates, to producing albums, to arranging, just doing all these things on a day-to-day, there's a part of it which becomes, a grind isn't really the right word, but it becomes like a machine that you're in. You know, it's a spirit and it's an essence, but it's also an industry. And that industry part of it can become a bit of a machine. So having some time outside of that industry part to just let the spirit and that energy and that life force and that vibration really connect. It was like drinking cold water on a summer's day, you know. It's just like something I really needed. I started doing these musical meditations every day and just really just exploring just sound, just the sound of the instrument, just spending time to just reconnect with it and just let that absorb and take over. And then I was just like, I found myself on a gig after months of not playing, and I could feel a tear coming into my eye. I was just, I couldn't believe it. Just the music was the vibrations and just that sound and just the appreciation for being on stage and playing for people. It was amazing, you know? So it's something that I never took for granted. I was always grateful to be on any stage that I was on, but it took on a whole new meaning when all of that was taken away for a period of time, you know? And then being in studio during the lockdowns, some amazing things, amazing projects came through, actually. I did this awesome project with the Bleachers, and we went on the studio of Electric Ladyland, and we recorded a couple songs, one with Bruce Springsteen, one with Annie from St. Vincent, and then a bunch of Jack Antonoff songs, which are really deep songs, you know. And you know, we all had to be COVID tested, and we all had to we created this mini bubble for the day, and we just got this beautiful experience sometime in October when New York was still in lockdown. Mm-hmm. Other places like in Europe, they'd opened up and were starting to re-lock down again, because I remember last summer, Europe was kind of open a little bit. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that kind of sucked for us because we were like, oh man, we're still heavily locked down. But, you know, having that experience and then being able to play for someone's wedding and then being able to play a live stream gig at Sony Hall with the Skatalites and then being able to do these things, every time I was just like, wow, there was a point where I didn't think this was ever going to happen again. Mm-hmm. So when I was there, I was just like, this is amazing. And now things are open up so much more. And I've actually played in front of lots of people again. And having that experience, it's like, yeah, it just reminds me, I like the experiences, or I like thinking about things in ways that take me out of just the physical. And this was the silver lining for me in that whole experience, is it took me out of the physical nature of the industry of music. And it just brought me back into that spiritual side of it, that essence to it, and that just appreciation and love for connecting this vibration with another person, you know?
Okay. Yeah. So what's your next project?
Next project is tour. The calendar, as we mentioned, is starting to fill up again. So the next project is tours and events. And then personally, I'm in the studio just writing and recording some new material. Nice. So when those things are ready, I will keep you posted. But for now, I'm in the creative stage. Yeah, exactly. I'm in the lab. I'm in the laboratory, just putting things together.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to listening to it when it's ready.
Me too.
Yeah. Do you have something you want to share before we finish? And I think your kids are.
You can hear them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
They're kind of crying on the background.
Exactly. They're getting ready. They want some more playtime. So this is. I think that's what I'm going to be doing next. But yeah, that was it. I want to thank you for asking the questions you asked, and we've, as you said, we met 3 years ago, so it's been an interesting relationship, this journey of just working on this sound and finding this vibe. So I appreciate everything you've done for the saxophone community. I appreciate everything that you guys are doing, and anyone who's tuned in and is listening, thanks for being here. Thanks for checking this out. And if you're a musician, I am looking forward to hearing what you play. I'm looking forward to seeing you out there on stage. And I feel like now more than ever that we're seeing how resilient, how united the musical community is. We're seeing how important it is to be connected and to just play music, just be out there playing music. It's like one of those things that we can't live without as musicians, and we can't live without as listeners too. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, the next few years, how things go for everybody,
Yeah. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being with us. And yeah, it was a really interesting talk, and I hope you all enjoyed it as I did. And yeah, I really hope to see you soon. Like when you are coming to Europe, let me know.
Sure thing. I will do. Will do.
Yeah, and thank you for being there. Have a good night, good day, everyone, and see you soon. Bye.